Let's get it. Heart throb never. Because it's the law. That's an interesting statement. And it may be something that not too many people think about, often. Because, most people figure like, hey, if it's allowed by the government, and if it's the law, then it must be right. But is it though? You gotta ask yourself, is it right? I looked at this list off of a news site, NBC5. It was titled 25 Things That Used to Be Legal. Here's some of the things that used to be legal, like lobotomy, marrying your first cousin, prostitution, smoking anywhere, opium, methamphetamine, peyote, cocaine, LSD, GHB, hallucinogenic mushrooms, MDMA, heroin, driving and texting, segregation, women unable to vote, killing bald eagles, drinking at age 18, polygamy, slavery, child labor, domestic violence, open immigration, and even mailing children. All of these things used to once be permissible by law. And then we have, the slavery that actually on the books at one time, slavery was legal and it was the law. And anybody who didn't want to be in slavery was looked at as a criminal for trying to get out of slavery. But it was the law. So that made it right? Made it right. Segregation. Some of the American Black community might say, well, we was better off during segregation. So that's something that'll have to be studied and talked about more, but it was the law. Deep. But what about something like child support? We got the issue of, some fathers, or actually a lot of fathers, not paying their court-ordered child support if they've been to court for it. But then we have the situation of fathers who can't pay the child support not because they don't want to pay it, but because they can't pay it. They simply don't make enough money, or they don't have the skill set to make enough money to pay the amount of child support that's being required of them. So what does that do? This makes a person who might likely otherwise have never violated the law or had very minor instances with the law, you'll instantly turn them into a criminal for unpaid child support. Instantly. Because it's the law. And there used to be a thing called debt bondage or peonage that was on the books in the early 1800s. That you couldn't do that to people, like put them under a criminal class because of their inability to pay for something that they'd been, ordered to pay. It was called peonage or debt bondage. And let's look at, the definition of peonage or whatever, but it's the use of laborers found in servitude because of debt, or a system of convict labor by which convicts are leased by contractors, the condition of a peon. So we have some information about, how peonage or debt bondage was viewed, during the time of slavery or right when slavery was being outlawed. There's a statement from an article, the San Diego Tribune. For many years, prosecutions based on alleged violations of the 13th Amendment passed in 1865 to outlaw slavery and involuntary servitude focused on peonage cases, which is the use of financial debt as a loophole to enslave workers. This is deep, but it was the law. And then let's look at slavery versus peonage. You know what this says? Slavery versus peonage is Peonage, which is called debt slavery or debt servitude, is a system where an employer compels a worker to pay off a debt with work. Legally, peonage was outlawed by Congress in 1867. However, after Reconstruction, many Southern black men were swept into peonage through different methods, and the system was not completely eradicated until the 1940s. In many more cases, or in some cases, employers advance workers some pay, and workers willingly agree to work without pay in order to pay off the debt. Sometimes those debts were quickly paid off. In many more cases, however, workers became indebted to planters through sharecropping loans, merchants through credit, or company stores through living expenses. Workers were often unable to pay the debt and found themselves in a continuous work without pay cycle. But the most corrupt and abusive peonage occurred in concert or in conjunction with Southern state and country governments. In the South, many black men were picked up for minor crimes or on trumped up charges, and then they were faced with staggering fines and court fees, forced to work for a local employer who would pay their fines for them. Southern states also leased their convicts en masse to local industrialists. The paperwork and the debt record of these prisoners was often lost, and these men found themselves trapped in inescapable debt situations. Now, with all of that, this is exactly what's going on with child support. For those fathers who are placed under this system, which is actually illegal, they're placed under this system with accrued interest on the support that goes unpaid. So it's almost like they were given a loan and they failed to pay the loan back, and now they're accruing interest on it. But what happens with this situation is they'll take guys' driver's licenses. In a lot of states, they'll take the father's certifications and licensures for whatever job or occupation that they're in. And a lot of these companies and institutions, they have policies that if a person owes child support, they can't get a job there. I'm just curious to figure out how is this going to get the money to the children. Like, if you take the person's ability to drive or travel, that's another violation of a constitutional right. But you take their ability to drive or travel, how does that help them with maintaining a job? But the first thing, that they'll say is, well, these fathers just don't want to work and all of this. And, we have too many cases that show that this isn't the case. It's almost like with governments. If they don't like what another country is doing, they'll put a sanction on that country. And, the country won't be able to get goods and services or imports from other countries that would help, their nation's well-being and business sector and agricultural sector. They'll put a sanction on them if a country isn't doing what another country wants them to do. And some of the things as to why the countries get sanctioned, a lot of times we find out it's just the country that has the ability to sanction them, they're just bullying them. So I don't want to do a whole long drawn out thing about this peonage and debt bondage, because the topic is, because it's the law, is it right? And just because you have something on the books and it's the law, it doesn't mean that it's right. Like, to think about sending a person, and that was, women who are, being hit with child support as well, but to send a person to jail or make them a criminal for failure to pay child support, not only is it falling in lines with those things that I read earlier about the little loopholes that they use to keep men in slavery, but it also directly affects their natural right for reproduction. if they wanted the children. So indirectly, what the system is saying is that if you don't pay what we've said you need to pay, you'll be a criminal for bearing offspring. This is an incredible ordeal. It's incredible. And then the other thing is, we think of, the word peonage and its root peon, P-E-O-N. And then there's another word called peon, which is P-I-O-N. And the word peon, P-I-O-N, is one of, molecular physics or something like that? Or something, one of those sciences where a peon is, like a small, atomic level particle, like a quark or something like that. And then we have the word peon, which is P-E-O-N, and then we know what that means, which is a person who's indebted due to an unpaid debt that's owed to someone. But I just find it funny that both of these words sound the same, and they kind of basically, mean the same. Like when you look at the definitions of them, because they've used both of the words to indicate that the person who is a peon, whether it's P-E-O-N or P-I-O-N, that they're smaller than the greater thing around them. But just because it's the law doesn't mean that it's right. It's just something to think about. I'm out. Heart throb never.